Good afternoon. My name is Lori. Welcome to my channel. We are quilters for another Blabfest Friday, number 17. Who knew? Anyway, I have several topics to talk to you about. Behind me, you can see the weather quilt blocks. Yeah, I still don't have them done. I did finish one block out of 6, so there are 5 left. 5 left. I did finish one. I hate to admit this, but I made a mistake and turned 2 of the half square triangles the wrong direction. Well, not 2, 4 in each corner. I am not changing it. No one will know when they see the final quilt that that block is a mess and not right. I had it almost together before I realized that, oops, it wasn't right. So, oh well, tough. It's staying that way. Not quite right. Looks good anyway. So, didn't get very far. I did get all the pieces cut out. There are a lot of pieces. I'm glad that we won't be having too many travel days while I'm making this quilt. That's why I picked a complicated block, because I knew that there wouldn't be many of them. Oh, I got the doll quilt done. The doll quilt is finished for my great niece. I got it all quilted. I put some feathers on it for practice. Even if I mess the feathers up, Sadie's still gonna love the quilt. So I put those feathers on for practice. They turned out pretty well. I was very pleased with that. I used a piece of sunflower fabric for the back. It's bright and beautiful. I bought it at Hancock Fabric. I've been moving that around for a while. I gave half of the piece to my friend Rochelle because she likes sunflowers. And then I finished up the rest of it on this little quilt, except for scraps that I'll be cutting more of because they always seem to multiply and grow. I got a little label on there, and even the binding has sweet little daisies in it. So this is her Easter present. Shh, don't tell it. It's a secret. Speaking of the quilt machine, while I was putting things on the quilt machine, I think when Barb was here and she was doing her goose quilt, she was saying, how do you do this by yourself? Why don't you use like a hair clamp to hold that on there instead of fighting with it? That was like revolutionary. So I got an old hair clamp out that was missing a couple of its teeth, and it goes on straighter and faster. Thank you, Barb, for being my smart friend. That is fantastic. Don't you hate it when something is so obvious and you just don't see it yourself? And years go by and you still don't see it, and then it's like a light bulb going off. So I'm glad that we figured that one out. Speaking of big machines, my friend Lisa was here over the weekend. Now, Lisa doesn't quilt, but she does watch my show. She and I make jewelry sometimes, and she does sew, but usually only to repair clothes. So she asked, could she, because she saw me using the big machine on camera, could she try that? So I let her pick a couple blocks out of my extra parts box, and we turned it into a quilted bag. I pulled out some backing and I let her do whatever she wanted, whatever design, and it turned out very cute. Now, some of those blocks were made a while ago, and so all those seams were not spiraled and swirled. So there was a big bump, and it was hard for her to quilt over those. So we applied a silver button. It's amazing what ugly you can cover up with a button or an embellishment. So Lisa's bag turned out beautifully. Here it is. And she is now a quilter. She just got dragged right in. It's only a matter of time before she starts piecing everything. Shh, don't tell her. And don't tell her husband. Next up, somebody mentioned in a comment last Friday when I was putting in the new ironing station, and I was saying it was on wheels so I could move it out a little bit to use the big quilting machine. They were saying that the Mighty Movers were the best thing ever, and they are. I have lots of things, well, not a lot, but several things on Mighty Movers. I've got the ironing station on Mighty Movers. I have big bins of fabric, 6 of them. They're stacked 2 deep. It was too hard to just pull those, drag them out, and I'd either wear myself out just getting out fabric, or I'd need help to move things. So I put Mighty Movers under each pile of 2, and I can move them out myself. It makes life easy, and there you have it. Easier to play with my collections of fabric. I also have them underneath this coffee table that holds my containers of tops that need to be done. It's kind of like the coffee table of shame, but it's like having a short set of shelves. I hope that by keeping this in my way, I'm inspired to clear it off and finish those quilts. But it's a long, slow process. It takes time. They're a big project. Quilting is a big project when it comes down to the end of it. So I'm working at it. I'm getting more than one done a month, and that's better than some years when I had none done a month. So that's what's on wheels, those 3 big things. Next up, while I was cleaning, straightening, and organizing so I could turn the machine around and put in that new ironing station, I found a bag of quilts. Well, a big quilt and a small quilt. I am fairly certain that they were both made by my grandmother. Her language of love was not quilts. Her language of love was food. She did sew and quilt a little bit. She loved to sew Halloween costumes. And she did make some quilts, but not many. And she did embroider a little bit. She liked to embroider because there was an embroidery club in a little town where she lived at one point. So I know that this little quilt, I'm pretty sure it was hers. A couple big clues here. She loved to tie things with obnoxious colored yarn. Now both of these have red yarn, which is another hint. But she loved bright, thick yarn to tie quilts. And this quilt I recognize some of the fabrics, and I recognize some of her technique. Nothing ever lined up. She didn't really like patchwork except squares or crazy quilts. So I'm pretty sure that this was hers. And the fabric on the back it looks like 60s or early 70s fabric to me. It does have a binding, but she didn't finish the corners. So it just screams grandma to me as either a doll quilt or a baby quilt. The second quilt, it's larger, and I recognize some of the fabrics. Not only do I recognize the red ties, but I recognize some of the fabrics. There is fabric from, my aunt was in a pageant in high school, and she won she was the queen of the Flaming Foliage pageant in high school, and this green brocade silk was what her dress was made out of. And it shows up in many of the things that my grandmother made over the years after that, because they had somebody make that gown custom for my aunt. There's also velvet. There's feed sack material, and I know that was in my grandmother's collection because I inherited a few small pieces of it, and I used some of it in a quilt that I made. That grandmother's flower garden that needs repaired has some of that same feed sack in it. There's polyester, and to make it look varied, she put some of it up, and then she did the reverse side of some of it. There's a piece of it was blue felt, and it has rotted away because felt isn't really meant to be in a quilt that's used. There's some shirting fabric and other clothing fabric in there, And my grandmother didn't really do binding on most of her quilts. Her binding was like a border, and this one's even pieced on the back because she must not have had enough. And I know my grandmother loved polka dot fabric of any kind, any color. She especially loved red with white polka dots, or white with blue polka dots, but in this case it was red and white polka dots. So this needs repaired, and I'm taking it to my cabin, and I'll use it when my granddaughter comes to visit, and I will tell her stories about my grandma. Review about last week's little applique adventure. I guess it was earlier this week. I liked using the freezer paper on the bottom and giving it a little iron and then basting it. That made it so easy and quick to do the applique. You're thinking, oh, applique takes a while. Yes, it does, but if your pieces are prepared well, it makes it go faster. So it's worth the time in the preparation to make the appliquing process easier on your hands and on your shoulders, and just to get it done. So I liked it on the inside, on the bottom. I did not really care for it on the top because I know you can iron it down as many times as you need to, but I kept pulling it up accidentally. And then I would have to fiddle with it. I'd have to squeeze it and turn it and crease it and then go iron it. And then it was just a big hassle. Now this is where I'm going to admit that if I had my small basting pins, it probably would have gone much smoother and easier. Yes, I said it. But they're in Michigan and I am not. It probably would have gone smoother and easier with those fine basting pins, because those ones that I have are only 1/2 inch long. But I still get things stuck on them. That's why they're not here. So I think that would have been a better situation. I will show you a different way to do freezer paper applique, the way I learned later on in this series. And if you liked this week with the freezer paper underneath, wait till Monday. We are going to up that game one more notch, and we are going to throw in some starch with the freezer paper. And just you wait and see. Might use some paper plates too. It will be great fun. Anyway, thank you for tuning in and watching me blather on about all sorts of things. Please comment below. Tell me things you like, or other topics or related topics, or how you do things. I love hearing from people, and I don't mind that you tell long stories because they're great. I loved hearing somebody sent a story about inheriting applique pieces that were sewn over the heavier paper of flour and sugar sacks and putting them together. It was a great story. It made me feel so good about quilters in general and how we are so giving and do nice things for each other. It makes me a little sad when people don't get things done in their lifetime and then they become a discovery for someone else. But it's always good when somebody honors things that were started by another maker. Anyway, time for me to head off to some other project. Gotta keep busy. Actually, I need to film the episode from Monday so that I can take Easter off and enjoy the holiday and take that little doll quilt to my great niece. See you later.